It's time for another bull in the basement. And I figured I would give my next guest a little bit of a break from his terrific podcast called What's Next with, yes, Eric Wood. Hey, man, how you doing? You look great. Thanks for doing this. What's going on, man?
Oh, not a whole lot, man. Just gearing up for another busy fall and enjoying life, enjoying the summertime. How you been?
I've been good, man. This is sort of a new venture for me. You were my inspiration. I see you're just crushing it and everything you're doing with your podcast, your former teammates and all the motivational, inspirational speakers you've been having on. And I know you're doing a lot of that yourself. It's super cool. I'm so proud of you. We joke that we got you started in this process a long, long time ago, but you are now I'm taking lessons from you actually at this point. So you're killing it, man. And so congratulations on that.
Well, shoot, you showed me the way a long time ago. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate the plug for my podcast as well there. I have a ton of fun with it, as you probably know, being able to talk, just have conversations, interview style. So I'm working on skills that would translate to broadcasting or whatever it may be. But man, I've just learned so much from people over these last few years doing it.
Yeah, I'm going to turn on my donut fluorescent light. Hold on one second. And there it is. Now you can see me. I hope that this glow isn't blinding you, but deal with it the best you can.
You look angelic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Hey, are you an Olympics guy? I mean, you've been paying attention to it. Are you watching it? You got any particular Olympic sport that you love more than others?
I don't want to say I'm a fair weather Olympic fan, but like when Michael Phelps was making those epic runs, they were so much fun to watch. I love watching Simone Biles, and now she's out of the Olympics with an apparent injury. I had Justin Gatlin on my podcast, which was recorded back in June, and I was really hoping that at 39 years old, he was going to be able to compete in the Olympics, and he was actually a medal favorite at the time, and he ended up coming up short in the qualifying, but I get into it, but I found myself not watching a lot of the random events, maybe like I would if I was back in couch potato channel surfing mode.
I get it. Well, it's funny about the Olympics, right? We watch the Olympics every 4 years, and we're watching sports that we would never normally watch. Like we would never normally watch volleyball or gymnastics or diving or swimming or triathlon or now rock climbing and skateboarding generally, right? And now all of a sudden, every 4 years, we are just glued to this stuff. And I want to ask you sort of a serious question. You brought up Simone Biles and everything happened what happened in the last 24 hours with her. And I'm really interested in your take on it because mine quickly. I know old school people are saying, you're the GOAT, work through this. This is what you got into this for, deal with the pressure or whatever it would have been. But her thinking and approach was 100% spot on. And Eric, the thing I loved about what she did was she was an adult and transparent about what she did, because they probably could have hidden. They could have been like, well, she tweaked an ankle or she tweaked a ligament or something. We're working on it so she can be ready for the individuals. Instead, she got right up on the podium, right up on the dais with her teammates and said, listen, I wasn't 100% in my brain. My confidence is a little bit blown. I've had the bad vault routine. The last month hasn't been Simone Biles level. And I didn't want to let my team, my country, anybody else down because I didn't feel like I was at my best. I love the fact she was transparent and said right out, here's the deal. I wasn't ready. I wanted to let these girls who, unfortunately, so many people, when it comes to a level of Simone Biles, they know Simone Biles, the average sports fan. Yes. Well, who's on the women's gymnastics team? They know Simone Biles and nobody else. So she took a back seat and let them be the stars. They are world-class athletes. They deserve it. She was a great cheerleader. I loved what she did. What did you think about her approach to the situation?
Yeah, I think I feel similar to what you feel on the situation. And I think selfishly, we all assume that maybe her not at her best is still better than most. It's still going to be entertaining. But for her, she has a legacy she needs to uphold. I literally cannot name 5 other gymnasts of all time. And when you asked me if I was interested in the Olympics, I mentioned her in the same breath as Michael Phelps.
Right.
So when you're talking about greatest Olympians from my generation, she's it. And she does things in gymnastics and puts her body so high through the air and there's so much stress. She does things that don't seem humanly possible. So selfishly, that is going to bridge the gap to these preseason games for a lot of people. And without her in it, then the appeal isn't there. The one thing I do like about the Olympics is as long as the US is on. So if you're watching like CBS, like local coverage of it, or NBC, sorry, NBC. If you're watching NBC coverage of it, you're generally going to see a US participant. If you're watching one of the more random channels, then you're not going to get them, but at least you have someone to root for at all times. But it's amazing to me. And you talk about how big it was of her to say she's not going to be at her best. She's been training for 5 years for these Olympics. And now I know in gymnastics, she's probably been competing. I just don't know exactly where. I'm sure there's world championships and whatnot in between those years, but 5 years to prepare for this moment, to win many more golds. And she has to pull herself and makes a decision to let others, because she probably could have went out and at least got herself a couple more golds.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Eric Wood, obviously our guest. I got to ask you, so this is going to be wide range of stuff, right? We'll obviously do Bills because you're our guy. But I got to ask you about golf, right? So you golf Pebble Beach. My Pebble Beach golf experience is by playing Tiger Woods on my Wii or whatever, right? I watched you and I saw you video and I think still pictures. What was it, number 7, the par 3 that you hit a wedge, it's like 95 yards or something?
Yep.
Tell me about the Pebble Beach golf experience. I know you love golf and you're really good at it. Tell me about that.
It's absolutely incredible. And my first experience with Pebble Beach was Tiger Woods as well. And so the first time I played Pebble Beach was in 2010. I played it with Andy Levitre. He got paired up with a guy and his daughter, and a guy who's maybe about 40-ish. His daughter was maybe 15 years old. So the 4 of us are playing. Andy, an uncapped golfer, couldn't even get a handicap. And I wasn't great at the time, low double-digit handicap golfer. But I get up on the first tee, and the caddy said, "Here, take out your 5-iron and just kind of hit it at the bunker." I said, "5-iron? I played this hole so many times on Tiger Woods. This isn't a 5-iron." He said, "Well, they play from back there." And I said, at 24 years old, I said, "Hey, I didn't pay $500 to hit a 4-iron or a 5-iron off number 1. I'll move back." Well, you get this crowd around you because everybody's lined up to play. And if you've ever been to Pebble Beach, you're right in the middle of kind of like this Pebble Beach village when you're teeing off of number 1. And so with this big crowd, that was probably the one fairway I hit. I generally play golf a little bit better with a crowd or some pressure, but this time, much different experience. We just had an incredible group with us. And we also got to play Cypress Point, which is just outstanding.
Another one I've played on video. Yes.
Yeah. But here's the thing about Pebble Beach. One, so all the scenes and stuff. So you get up on the tee box and you've seen it before on TV or video games or whatever it may be. And what I always say is so cool about golf is I can't pay. I mean, maybe you could, but it's hard to find a way to go out into Fenway and hit a baseball. There's no way that lets you go out and catch a pass during a Bills game from Josh Allen, but you can pay enough money to go get the experience that the pros have. We played Sawgrass this year 4 days after the players did, with the stands up. Like you can go get the experience that they've had. And that's one of the reasons I love golf so much.
Awesome. Okay. So what'd you shoot at Pebble?
Pebble, I shot a 79.
Oh man, come on. Ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that was a better round. I double bogeyed 16 and 18 and bogeyed 17. So I was playing a lot better than that. And I bogeyed 1 from 55 yards out off the tee. So started slow, ended terrible, but played pretty good in between.
Okay, very good. And then how'd you do on the island green at Sawgrass?
I put it on the green, and that was actually my birthday. I played it with 7 other buddies, and we did $100 a man, closest to the pin, and you could have 1 buyback, and I swiped $1,200 on it.
Yeah, well done, my friend. Well done.
And those are the stories you get on a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. So bucket list for you in golf. Is it St. Andrews? Is it Augusta? Like what's bucket list for you?
There's one course you're not allowed to talk about, which I won't, which would be number 1 on the bucket list. But the Scotland, going overseas and playing, I'm kind of eyeballing a 40th birthday trip to myself. But, there's still a bunch in the States that I haven't knocked out. I haven't played a lot of Northeast golf, like New York, that area. And there's some unbelievable courses up there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You get down to Shinnecock and Bethpage and places like that down there are great. Obviously, you've played Oak Hill a ton of times. But really cool. Okay. So staying on golf very quickly. We all know you've lost a ton of weight since your playing days. Are you a better golfer now than you were when you were playing?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the weight loss contributes to it. It's just a little bit different swing playing. Everything kind of moves a little bit different. I probably can walk 18 holes a little easier now than I could. But I think a lot of it just comes from experience because no offense to Kyle Williams, but he didn't lose that much weight post playing yet. And he's still playing on a plus handicap. So it doesn't necessarily mean if you look like Justin Thomas and you're 5'8", 140 pounds that you're going to smoke a golf ball.
No doubt. Eric Wood's with us on Bull in the Basement. So what are you now, like 240-ish?
No, 250.
250? Okay. For the viewer's sake that may not know this, like, so you were playing at about what, 305, 310, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we do that math and you've lost, 60 pounds ish. So how many calories were you ingesting when you were playing compared to what you are now generally?
It depended on the time of year and the activity level, but honestly, during the season, especially if it was hot out, as many as I possibly could to even try to keep the weight on. So probably in the 5,000 to 6,000 calorie range, but it was eat as much clean food as you can. So you don't feel like crap, but you had to add in maybe olive oils or MCT oil in your coffee, just ways that you could kind of cheat it, get protein shakes in. Because I knew from early in my career that if you pound a bunch of just junk food, yeah, it's going to keep the weight on, but you're not going to feel great in general. So about as much as you possibly could, not to get down in the weeds of it, but post playing, I got an RMR done, a resting metabolic rate, to see how many calories at rest I burn a day. And even in a weight loss zone, I'm just over 3,000 calories. I can still eat a day and be in the weight loss zone. So then you add an activity level that gives me a lot of weekend beers and binges to offset maybe a 2,500 to 3,000 calorie days during the week. But I tend to tone it way back during the week. And I try to live by an 80 to 90% rule. I don't get paid to be on magazine covers. I just want to live a long time and be able to make an impact and serve my family.
For sure. And you ran a half marathon recently. Am I right?
I did. And I got challenged to run 100 miles in a month. I had no aspirations of doing a half marathon. A few of my buddies were doing 100 miles in a month and grouped me into this message. I said, that's dumb. And they said, it's dumb because you can't do it. I said, well, now I got to do it. And then we had just under 13 miles to go at the end. And I said, well, let's just do a half marathon at this point, just so I can say I've done one. My doctor afterwards, I see one of those like concierge doctors, because with an NFL body, they're like dog years. So 9 years times 7, it's like 63 years added on to a 32-year-old body, or 35 now, but whenever I retired. So I tried to stay pretty in tune to my body. And he said, quit the long distance running, a 5K every now and then, all good, maybe a 10K, but you push it too much, you're going to lead to a quick joint replacement.
I got to ask you, so you go from a sport where, your plays are 12 seconds. It's like stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. So how did you get from sort of that mentality to be able to run 2.5 hours or whatever it took you, 13 miles, and not like kind of get bored halfway through it? Was it the music you were listening to? Was it you were with a bunch of guys? Like, how did you, because that's my biggest problem. I want to do things like that, but I get distracted. I start talking to myself and saying, what the hell am I doing? And stuff like that. So how did you push yourself through and be able to do that?
I ran the half marathon with a buddy, and I also did a 10-mile race during that 100 miles in a month. And both those I ran with a buddy. So we were talking most of that time. I'm into podcasts. I'm into audiobooks. So a lot of times I would knock out a lot of the runs and just kind of get in the zone. But it's amazing you say that, because I'm so ingrained for short bursts. And I would always tell my wife when I take off from the house, I'd say, man, I feel like crap. I'm going to do a short one. It would always end up being a little bit longer than I probably planned. But then I would always say, the first 0.4 of a mile, because I'm tracking it on my watch, the first 0.4 of a mile are so much harder than the final 0.4. Like once you get going, and this is anything in life, like once you've kind of pushed past that little bit of threshold, then once you get into it, you enjoy the experience. And it's not enjoyable the entire time, but then you definitely know that you're closer to the end than the start. and you're going to enjoy the effects of it afterwards. But, I don't think I've ever pushed myself to the David Goggins who says we're all at only 40% of our capacity or whatever he says exactly. But anytime you get on those runs, you generally will amaze yourself by how far you can go if you can get out of your own head.
Right. 100%. Eric Woods on this. So let's talk a little bit more about you. I want to go back to your childhood. Was football always your best sport?
Probably my best, but my favorite sport was basketball. I thought I was going to be a basketball player at one point. I'm not sure at what level, but I was 6'4", maybe my freshman year of high school. And I mean, I weighed 200 pounds my junior year of high school and didn't start on our team. I was a backup tight end. So it wasn't like I was sitting there as this blue chip prospect in football either. I grew into my body, played offensive line my senior year, ended up getting one scholarship offer to the University of Louisville.
Thank you for segueing into a question I had lined up, which was you were obviously converted. You were a guy that was going to potentially get some newspaper headlines by being a skill player to being an interior lineman who arguably are the least noticed players of all. So you go into the interior line, you get good at it, you get the scholarship to Louisville. At what point did you think that, wow, Sundays are a possibility? This might actually happen.
Yeah, I redshirted. That's a great question. So I redshirted my freshman year at the University of Louisville, traveled with the team, but ended up not having to blow my red shirt. I played and started for our team my second year, which was my redshirt freshman year. We had one of the best offenses in the country. We went to the Gator Bowl. That was when Marcus Vick stomped on Elvis Dumerville's leg. For all those football enthusiasts out there, they might remember that. But I got freshman All-American, and that's maybe I deserved it. Maybe it was simply because I was a starting center. I was a freshman on one of the top 5 offenses in the country. But when I got my freshman All-American award mailed to me, they included a letter that gave a percentage of freshman All-American that get drafted into the NFL draft eventually. And the percentage was pretty dang high. And I thought, wow, now I have a shot at this. And that honestly gave me a lot of hope. And I talk often on the podcast, we get into people about there's often critical moments throughout your journey where someone speaks confidence into you that gives you a vision that you were probably too uncomfortable having. I had Chad Michael Murray, Buffalo native, on my podcast, and this is a non-sports one, but he was in a hospital bed recovering from a serious illness, and a nurse spoke that confidence in him. It could come from anywhere. For me, it came from a bunch of coaches along the way. But when I received that letter, my dreams and goals got a little bit bigger.
With Eric Woods. So let's continue with football. So obviously you move on to the NFL. I have to ask you about a story you told me the day after you were drafted. You were in studio with me, and it was you and Mabin. And you somehow, I think the question was, what are you going to do with your first paycheck? And you talked about your car, your college car, and how much of a piece of crap it was and how you ended up unloading it. Please let the viewers know and tell that story, because it was amazing. First of all, that you could actually get into the car that you had. And then secondly, how you got rid of it was pretty funny.
So one of my favorite questions to ask people on a podcast is, what was your first car? And I'll generally do it after a pretty heavy question, because they just light up, because it brings you back to a time of your life where you got your first mode of transportation. It's a sign of freedom in your life. So it kind of brings you back to a certain place. For me, not all fond memories of my first car. It was a 92 Honda Accord, but the transmission was all jacked up. It had been broken into. I had driven to a bar one night, was not going to drive home, left it overnight, and it got broken into, so it didn't even have a radio in it. And so when the transmission finally bit it, I called up my dad. I said, they want, I can't remember exactly how much it was, $600 to fix this thing. And he said, well, it's not worth $600. It wasn't worth the tank of gas you put in it. So he said, see how much they'll give you for it. I called up my dad back. Yeah, they'll give me $100. He said, call him back and tell him someone just offered you $200. I called him back. I said, someone just offered me $200, and they said, we'll give you $200. So I made 100% profit in that negotiation, got my $200, and then didn't have a car for a while. So when I got drafted, I needed a car, and that's where that money was going to go to.
Good for you. That's awesome. I love that story. Eric Woods with us.
Great memory there.
Oh, there's another thing that I want to ask you about, and I was going to kind of save it to the end, but what the hell, we're at it. We were at a Punt Foundation dinner years back. I happened to be emceeing with our good friend Brian Mormon. My wife was there. You were there. A lot of your teammates were there. And there happened to be An auction was all up and up for this beautiful dog. And
this is actually going to be really funny. Keep going, but I got something for you too.
Good. I can't wait. So I'm not an auctioneer at all. I attempt to do it and I'm really bad at it, but whatever. So we're auctioning this dog off, and all of a sudden to my right, I see a paddle raise up and a familiar voice, and it's my wife. And the dollar number was well into the 4 figures. And I'm thinking, no. And you were in the bidding process. So now it's going back and forth between you and my wife. And I'm begging to you live on stage in front of all of these people, you got to save me. And eventually you did. You saved my ass. You bought the dog. How is the dog?
It's her 11th birthday today.
Come on.
Swear.
It's awesome.
It's unbelievable you bring up that story. And yeah, you can buy a lab for about $200 in Kentucky, but I bought a 4-figure, and it wasn't $1,000 lab that was fully trained. But they do that at a bunch of Make-A-Wish, and I don't know if they give these dogs sedatives beforehand, so they just act calm and sweet, and they're so well behaved. But Daisy put the charm on me that night, and she stayed that same way throughout her whole life, and she's still chucking along now.
That's awesome, man. Who are your best buddies from your Bills playing days that you talk to on a fairly regular basis? You mentioned Andy Levitri a little bit earlier, and I know you guys were like this when you played together, man. I mean, is he one of those guys?
We've lost contact some, when you separate and wives and kids and whatnot. I still stay in pretty close contact with Ryan Fitzpatrick. We text really often. I get to see Kyle Williams fairly often, really close with Craig Urbick, Garrison Sanborn. I'm going to leave people off this list, but Freddie, still close with Dion, really close with Richie, one of my best friends. It's funny. Some of them, like my relationship with Richie, I almost don't even consider it football related because, we only played together for a few years, but we've stayed so close. But it's amazing. One, I was in Buffalo for so long, so I had some really long tenured teammates, but then also when you're in a community like Buffalo and you live close by each other, and I'll never be the one to put my foot in my mouth and say there's nothing to do in Buffalo and that's why we're close. That's not it. We get to live close to each other because the city's not spread out like in most places. So, I mean, there was 8 guys that lived in our neighborhood on the team. So guys like Lorenzo Alexander, so I'm still close with Colt Anderson. I mean, we had so many guys that were right in our neighborhood that we would just have a ball.
By the way, talking about, so you mentioned Fitz. So you got Fitz, you had T.O., you had Beast Mode, you had Stevie Johnson, you had Sean Merriman. You guys, when you were there, you had some incredible characters on your team.
We did. We certainly did. When I first walked in the building, T.O.'s locker was right next to mine, and it's pretty rare that you get like almost starstruck in the NFL. Like you're supposed to be in the locker room with these guys. You're supposed to be on the field with these guys. T.O. was one of those guys, especially when he was there my rookie year. He felt almost kind of like that larger than life, huge personality. Like that is a superstar. On the NFL field, there's probably only a few guys like shaking a Peyton Manning's hand in a captain's circle before the game. Like, what am I going to tell this dude? Stay healthy. Good luck, Peyton. Like that is the man. He's one of the best of all time. Brady kind of the same way. And those guys are almost kind of a notch above the rest of us NFL players as far as a superstar status.
All right. So training camp's underway officially. Talk a little bit about how you go from off season where you're kind of on your own clock, right? I mean, yeah, you're working out a little bit, but you're doing some vacations, you're doing a lot more family time than you normally would during the regular season. And then you get to training camp and now everything is regimented and it's clocked out and it's routine. And when you step in day one, it's 9 months, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. How long does it take you to go from being in, we'll call it summer vacation, to understanding, whoa, we're working now?
It's almost ingrained in you. And that's a great question, but it's almost ingrained in you because I started playing football when I was 9 years old. We never took any vacations or anything once either school started and we were in football mode, or when I was in high school, college, certainly not, and then NFL especially. So almost everybody, you kind of put life on hold. I will say I was in a unique situation where every training camp I entered, I was worth more money if they cut me than if they kept me on the team, which I was also a captain for a lot of my career. And I had good standing within the organization, but I got to go to training camp and truly work on my craft and not have to worry about, man, if I lose one rep here, I might be out the door. I could truly work on things throughout training camp and preseason games. I can truly try and get better and try and master my craft. So I always enjoyed it. I love being around the guys. And it sounds terrible because you're away from your family. It's a lot of work. Guys are in super stressful positions, but I'd play a bunch of golf in Rochester. I enjoyed that. And then we looked forward to the season because once someone would visit Buffalo for a game, they would always come back. So towards the end of my career, we would have between 10 and 20 visitors probably per game, which always ended post game with a beer at my truck, let the traffic die out. And then it would be on to Elio to Paulo's, hang out there. Maybe we stop at Jim's tailgate beforehand. So the games were always so much fun. And I mean, I've said it before. I loved football so much. It's a blessing probably that God pulled me out of football when he did, because I would have just kept playing till the wheels fell off.
And the season probably goes faster than people believe, right?
It does and it doesn't. It'll be like week 8 and you're like, man, I can't believe we got to week 8. And then there's sometimes where you're eliminated from the playoffs and it's December 10th and you got 3 games to go and you got to go put your body on the line and you're not competing for that goal that you set out initially at the beginning of the season. And those weeks can be pretty long.
Yeah, I believe it. Let's get to a tough question. You mentioned a couple of times during this that you were a captain. Obviously, with the current team roster, the vaccination issue is here. And it's been very public between Beasley, Jerry Hughes, who very well. If you're a captain, how do you deal, man? It's new to kind of everybody, right? Like how would you address that?
I would say this, and this is something I would say is a mentor as well to younger players as well. And that is, anytime you become a bigger distraction than you're standing within the team, that could really hurt your career. So I respect your decision, your opinions. It is not even close to apples, but there were issues that popped up through my career where guys would be really outspoken about them. Think of a Tim Tebow. He was so outspoken about Christianity, and that is as good. I mean, I'm a devout Christian, but he almost played himself out of the NFL by, at one point he was definitely a top 64 quarterback or playmaker at the position. He won a playoff game. There's a lot of quarterbacks that didn't, but when you're a bigger distraction, then you are asset to the organization. If you're not going to be a big time starter, they're probably not going to keep you around. So I would just, as a mentor to younger guys and to guys making a decision, that, do all your research. And if you're not comfortable with it, do your own thing. I'm going to respect anybody within the locker room. We come from all over the place. And that's the cool thing about an NFL locker room. We're all fighting for the same cause. And I don't care if you're white, black, you came from a poor family, a wealthy family. I don't care what part of the country you're from. I don't care what religion you are. We're on a mission. And you know what? Come Thanksgiving, you're invited to my house. Come Christmas, you come eat with my family, and we'd host huge meals for everybody. But please don't let the issues become big enough where it distracts us from all of our goals.
Sean a little bit, and he's mentioned many times, sensitive questions are asked of him or management, and they'll be like, listen, we're going to keep that in-house, where clearly some of this stuff is out of the house and in the great wide open. Sean, I mean, how do you think he's handling it? This is I'm sure a very difficult, and I hate to overuse the word, but process, I'm sure, that he's had to go through leading up to now training camp.
Absolutely. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but nobody wants that. No head coach wants issues spilling out of the locker room, no matter what they are. I mean, think Pittsburgh Steelers a couple of years ago when people were videotaping Tomlin in a post game, and it wasn't anything wrong he said. It just, you want to keep everything in house. This is our team. This is our family. This is our time. You show up to training camp, that's the people you're going to spend the most time with over the next 6 months, no matter what. And so you want everything to kind of stay in house. And no, it's not a fun time for him to try and navigate those waters right now. I'm sure.
Yeah. Because outside of catastrophic injury, God forbid, if this somehow came to play, I mean, that would be tragic for such a talented team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing to me, just in general, how outspoken athletes are getting. And it's amazing, over my left shoulder, I got Muhammad Ali behind me, Louisville's finest, and made just unbelievable impacts by using his voice. And you see athletes, you see Patrick Mahomes right now, and you see these athletes using their voice to try and create positive change, whatever it may be. It just seems like social media has now given a lot of players a voice, not necessarily just the greatest of all time a voice or a LeBron James. It's given a lot of players a voice.
So let's get to the field. Bills additions. The Tulele is going to play. I'm sure that's great for them. Matt Breida comes in. You get Emmanuel Sanders. You get Hollister from Seattle, nice player. You get the rookie pass rushers. All, I think, potentially significant additions for you. What has to happen for this team to get over the hump? What were they missing a year ago that with maybe some of those names, they could rectify and make another significant run and maybe win a championship this year?
Yeah, so it's interesting when Sean and Brandon talked in the postseason press conference, one of the first things they mentioned was the running game. And the Bills offense was so dynamic last year in the pass game. And I do not want to go back to a running offense. You got Josh Allen, you have these weapons at receiver, you have a great pass blocking offensive line that oftentimes goes underappreciated. So stick with the pass, but when you do run the ball, you got to be more effective. How that plays itself out this year, you got to be able to run the ball effectively. And I think they were pointing at solely the fact that the team to beat right now is Kansas City in the AFC. They've been to the last 2 Super Bowls. That is your litmus test, and you just can't simply put that offense back on the field so fast. Even if you are scoring, you'd like to hold the ball longer. And then to me, when I watched Tampa Bay dictate the game defensively against Kansas City's offense with a 4-man pass rush, and now you got to keep in mind, 2 tackles got hurt in the playoffs for Kansas City, 1 late in the game against the Bills and maybe 1 early in the game against the Bills. So the Bills won against a different offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm not being hypercritical of the pass rush of the Bills in that game, other than the fact that I think the Bills understand that an offense like Kansas City, you have to be able to control the game with 4 men coming, because if not, you're going to string out your secondary and those big plays are coming. So for me, it's 4-man pass rush. How disruptive can you be on the quarterback this year? And an effective, if you're going to keep everything else the same on offense, otherwise I'd say do exactly what you did last year on offense, because you lit up the league. But if you could up your yards per carry, I think that helps control football games.
For sure. How about the division? It should be really fun to watch. I mean, think about it. You got Tua in Miami. You might have Mac Jones in New England. And then you got Zach Wilson with the Jets. Now, you would think that Josh has an extreme advantage over all those guys, but it still should be really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And the most interesting to me is New England. And I know Miami had a great year last year, and they got a good defense. So you have to keep them in the mix, because Tua could have a great year this year. To me, they don't stand out. And maybe the potential is not as high as what New England can be. What's going to be interesting to me is, and I've said this a couple times before on other shows, so I hope I'm not repeating myself if people have heard me, but the one year we had Matt Castle and Tyrod Taylor and EJ Manuel competing for the starting quarterback position, we rolled into the season with Castle and Tyrod as our 2 main quarterbacks. But when you have 2 guys like that, it's impossible. You don't have enough practice time to have 2 different offenses. Cam Newton and Mac Jones are going to run 2 different offenses. And so do you roll with Mac Jones and keep Hoyer or the kid from Auburn as the backup, or do you keep Cam Newton there? And then I guess you have Mac Jones as the backup, who would be running a lot of the show team, and maybe he's getting reps there. I'm not exactly sure how that works out. To me, if I had to guess, it'd be Mac Jones and Brian Hoyer rolling into the season.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then the league, obviously, you mentioned, we all know you played with Fitz. You know how dynamic he can be. And a lot of people are saying the Washington football team is a team to reckon with. That not only is he going to be able to do some stuff, he's got some receivers on the outside there. He's got a nice little running game, and his defense is really, really good. So what do you make of the Washington team?
Their defensive line is absolutely legit. And when you have a defensive line like that, and you have a quarterback like Ryan Fitzpatrick that can light it up. And for all the Fitz haters for all over the years, he just continues to get it done. And I don't care what you say. And he's one of my best friends and I love him to death, but that dude makes plays. And he has generally showed up pretty well against the Bills as well. So you look at that early in the season matchup against Washington and you think, man, that game's not as surefire of a win as it looked like before they picked up Fitzpatrick. It's going to be interesting up there, though. They also play in a fairly weak division, and I'm so glad he's back in the NFC so that I can truly root for him week in and week out. Maybe not until the Super Bowl if they're playing the Bills, but I can root for him week to week. But it's going to be interesting because that division's not very strong. So Ryan Fitzpatrick has set NFL records for most amount of teams throwing touchdown passes for. I just hope to God he doesn't set the record for most seasons and most teams played for without ever playing in a playoff game, which is where he's sitting right now. So I hope to God he can get over the hump this year.
For sure. Dallas probably going to be better with Dak Prescott back now full time, we would think, in that division. But you got, Brady and the Bucs, and a lot has been made about the fact that they are bringing back their entire team from their Super Bowl win. You got obviously the Chiefs coming back. You got the Packers now. Rodgers is back. We don't know the backstory about how he ended up back in Green Bay, but whatever he is. You got, your hometown Cincinnati. You got Joe Burrow healthy. Who knows? You got Herbert out with the Chargers. There's some really talented quarterbacks in this league that I think are going to make the league that much more competitive going on.
Yeah, one thing I'll give you this because I'm not sure you've seen this, heard about this. One guy you didn't mention, Russell Wilson, who they started off so hot last year. The Bills beat them down, and then they spiraled a little bit after that. Their defense wasn't outstanding. They got dinged up and all that. But Russell Wilson, so there's a guy named Tim Grover. He's a performance coach. He worked with Michael Jordan for about 15 years, one-on-one. He retires, and Kobe Bryant starts working with him. He wins three championships. Well, he's only worked with basketball guys primarily. Russell Wilson's now working with Tim Grover. And so I'm like, Russell Wilson might just be this cold-blooded killer this year. And not that he hasn't been, but he could take that up a notch.
And we haven't mentioned the Browns. They get Beckham back. They have an incredible run game. Mayfield took a little bit of a step up last year. Roethlisberger is back. Big Ben personally for the Steelers. He's back. It should be a really, really interesting season. Have you looked at it close enough to actually figure out what it's going to look like late or early February?
No, and if you look at it too close, you'll drive yourself nuts because there's so much parity in the NFL. A guy who won the MVP a couple years ago, Lamar Jackson. You don't even mention it. That's how much young talent you have in this league, and they're talking about doing some more downfield throwing with the Ravens this year. There's a lot of interesting storylines. That's what makes this the greatest reality show in sports. That you have headlines week to week, you get the drama, you have parity. Every game is essentially a week building up. You add one more game at 17, they still matter. They still matter every single week, as opposed to saying, hey, that one's okay. Don't worry about that one. It's a ton of fun.
Lastly, how pumped are you to get, because I talked to Murph the other day. He's so excited to have you back in the booth with him in a sold out Highmark Stadium. How pumped are you to get back in the booth with a sellout crowd for these Bills games this year?
Oh, I'm beyond excited. And last year was not very fun doing the post game from home and being removed from this such special season. I have so many people that I care about and gotten to know and great friends up in the Buffalo area that I genuinely look forward to seeing every year. I've missed being up in Buffalo. This is the longest I've been away from Buffalo since I got drafted there. And it's been tough being away. I guess I'll be up there a bunch coming up because we got preseason games, Jim Kelly's golf tournament. I got an appearance early with Clean Loop Energy. So I got some stuff coming in Buffalo. So I'm looking forward to getting back to town. But no, I truly missed it. And it's amazing. I did an appearance with Ross Tucker recently on his podcast. And we were talking about, he was actually at the Bills game, the playoff game, with the limited amount of fans. And he said that was the loudest 7,500 he's ever heard in his entire life. And it's going to be amazing letting these Bills fans hop in there with built up excitement of a full year being away, over a year, obviously. And man, I'm truly excited.
That's awesome. And I hope too that, and I know there's a lot of planning that goes involved, but do you have any plans on bringing your fundraiser back, maybe in Buffalo again this year?
Yep.
Good.
And you'll be on the short list. We'll call
Awesome.
for some help with that one. We're trying to lock down a date. We're got to make sure we abide by all the guidelines, but by all indications, we should be able to have a decent sized event, and Flights and Bites will be rolling. It's amazing. So the Eric Wood Foundation became the Eric Wood Fund under Oshai Children's Hospital. By the time the event rolls around, it'll be the Evan Wood Fund, which is my brother's name, who passed. To the foundation was originally made in his honor. So for me, make it his honor, let him live that legacy in Buffalo. And so it'll be the Evan Wood Fund at the time, which I'm so excited about. But it's amazing how much we were able to do during the pandemic. So many people were so generous still with the fund to be able to help out with meals, and 500 Pearl stepped up and did so much for these families, giving them cheap hotel rooms with no one traveling into the area. You know what? The people that can't stay at the Ronald McDonald House because of COVID regulations, we'll put them up in rooms. And it was truly special. It never ceases to amaze me when it comes to Buffalo, how generous people are. But it always blows me away.
Well, listen, man, continue the great work on your podcast. What's next with Eric Wood? I hope you enjoyed guesting on this one. And throughout the year, I hope we can catch up again and do this a couple of more times as the football season rolls on, man.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Great talking to you. Thanks for doing it. And we look forward to seeing you soon, man.
Sounds good. I'll tell Daisy you said happy birthday.
Please do. And best to Leslie and the kids.
Thanks, brother.
All right, man.